Something similar has happened in all my novels. Someone rises up out of the grave and begins to talk to me. I like graveyards, especially the ones on Martha's Vineyard where there are some very, very old graves with worn inscriptions. There's also some pretty good modern inscriptions. One of my favorites, recent grave, has an inscription that says, "At last, a year-round resident." But it's hard to explain this business of voice hearing. I found especially hard to explain it to young children. Didn't go very well with my son when he was small. I remember one day I'd been helping him with a project, and then I got him started and I said, "You know what, Mum has to go to work now." And I left him to it, and I went up to my study, and about an hour passed, maybe a bit less, and I hear this tapping of little feet coming up the stairs. And then I had that feeling you get when somebody is staring at you, not happily. And I turned around, and there he was with a very malevolent expression on his face. "You said you were working." "Mummy is working, darling." "No, you're not. You're just sitting there." "Darling, Mummy has to sit very quietly because she's trying to hear the voices of people who've been dead for hundreds of years." Back down the stairs. But that is really what it's like. And it's even more difficult when the voices you're trying to hear are the voices of people who, in their own time period, were the unheard. The maid who was illiterate and who didn't get to set down how she felt about caring for that minister. The enslaved woman on a Virginia plantation when teaching slaves to read was against the law. The Puritan minister's daughter on Martha's Vineyard, who has been taught to read because it is thought good for Puritan girls to be able to read the Bible so that when they're mothers they'll be able to instruct their children from it. But they don't have to learn to write, because why would any Puritan goodwife require a skill that is used for communicating with people outside of your own family? So that's one reason there are no female diaries from colonial America before 1700, and no really detailed ones till 1750, which was a whole 100 years later than the period I was interested in. So where would you go to hear her voice? To imagine how she might have expressed herself, what issues might have occupied her mind? Well, sadly I discovered you go to court. You can find her there in every era, accused of being a witch because she was poor and alone, or I suppose you could say favorite charge, the charge of being a scold. Being a scold meant you'd been overheard criticizing a man in a public place. It's a good thing it's not still on the books. I think a good few of us might not be here tonight. But in the English assizes, the local courts, and in the Massachusetts Bay Colony's religious tribunals, they're very diligent about taking down verbatim testimony. So you hear women speaking in their own voices, and you can read what they had to say, and you recognize her anger and her sense of injustice, her awareness that she as a woman is getting a crook deal. Sometimes reviewers of my novels have complained that my narrators' voices are too modern and too feminist. I urge them to go and read some 17th century. I don't know why I am, as a novelist who started out talking about the present as a journalist, now so attracted to stories of the past. I think it might be a case of symbiosis. Because I was an Australian of a particular era, I wanted to know the world and to travel and adventure abroad. So in my travels, I met a man who never wished to leave his own shore, who would have dwelt contentedly in the archives that can be found in the Boston, Washington, New York corridor. That man loves history. But because he met me, he became a world-traveling adventure writer. Because of him, I developed an interest in these stories from the past. Moral, if any? It's fun to sleep with foreigners. But be warned, this can change your life. So now, as I make my home in literature in a particular genre of fiction that explores the places in that deep well that the burning paper has left unilluminated, I think back to that mathematician and her search for a more perfect description of the world's swoops and curves. What can I know, after all, that's true about these people who lived and died so long ago? Lived and died, as Henry James asserts, with a consciousness completely different from ours. A consciousness formed when more than half the things that make our world did not yet exist for them. But I believe that consciousness isn't shaped by things. You can move the furniture around as much as you like. The emotions of the people in the room will not change. Consciousness, I think, is shaped by fear and joy, hatred and tenderness. This is what I know.